And there's something about giving yourself license to kill the player that makes you kill them at every opportunity.
Hello, everyone. My name is Breezeby, and welcome back to a Candid Conversation with. I am joined here today by a very special guest who I'm personally very excited. I know all of our guests are very special, but this one happens to have made one of my favorite games of all time, and he's so graciously agreed to chat. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Who are you, and what do you do?
Ask myself that every day.
Yeah.
No, I am Dave Gilbert. I run a little indie studio called Wadjet Games. We do point and click style adventure games. We've been around since 2006, so been doing this for almost, good God, almost 20 years. And I've put myself in a position where I can't do much else. So here I am.
But it seems like you like it, or else I think you would have stopped by now.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, 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 yes.
Okay.
I do like it a lot. Otherwise, exactly. There are, I imagine there are easier ways to earn a living, but I can't think of many that would be as satisfying.
Yeah. And so I think when people hear of Wadjet Eye Games, they think you specifically, but you were just talking in a very we sense. So how big is your team? It's not just
Oh,
you.
well, I mean, it mostly is.
Yeah.
It's it's mostly me and freelancers. The only other full-time person we have is Ben Chandler, who does art for us. I guess you'd call him like a full-time freelancer. Like he's on salary basically, and
Yeah.
he does art for anything that we need. Um, excuse me. And of course, I have a bunch of freelancers I work with. I have regular composers and voiceover actors and stuff like that that I work with regularly. I have a PR consultant that I use pretty regularly. Her name is Emily. She's awesome. But mostly it's me.
Yeah. I was reading a few other interviews with you over the years, which you've done many of. I love that you're so open to just chatting
I'm
with
happy to
any
talk about
rando.
myself for as long as you want me to. You want me to keep talking about myself? I am happy to keep talking about myself. So no worries there.
No, I think that's phenomenal. But I was reading that you started from pretty humble beginnings, like I think any indie developer does, but you really started in a time I think indie gaming has really blown up in the last decade, and you've been doing this, like
Mhm.
you said, for almost 20 years. So when you started, making games by yourself, I think I read somewhere that you were like, I just would sit in a coffee shop so I could be like out of my parents' house and I would just like
Yeah,
make
yeah, yeah, yeah.
games on my laptop.
Well, it was like I would. I'm sorry. Felt like you were going to say more.
No, continue.
No?
Go
Okay. All
riff
right.
along.
I'll riff along. I was in between jobs, and it was this weird situation where I had spent a year teaching abroad, and I had rented out my apartment while I was doing that because I owned an apartment, a little apartment in Manhattan, and I was renting it out. And when I came back, the renter had a few months left on the lease, and I wasn't going to kick him out, so I was living with my parents, but I was not working because I had just finished this gig, and so I wasn't eager to get a new job right away, and I had some money saved up, and my parents had just recently retired, and so I was living with them, and like they're retired and home all day, and I'm not working. And I felt like the biggest loser. So even though I technically had my own place, I was still
Sure.
living with my parents for a few months. So it's just as a way to kind of pretend I was working. I would take my laptop to a cafe, and I worked on a game called The Shiva, just as a way to pretend I was working. And I guess what they say about fake it till you make it is true, because I ended up selling that game, and that kind of led to the career I have now.
Yeah. And first of all, I did read that you were abroad in Korea, correct?
Brought in Korea?
You were abroad in
Oh,
Korea.
I was abroad. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was what I was doing. I was teaching. I was doing an English teaching thing in Korea that year. Yeah.
And were you formally trained as an English teacher, or this was
No.
something? Really? How did you get
No.
into that?
It was. I was kind of bumming. I had various series of terrible corporate jobs in my 20s. Like I just
Relatable.
really didn't know what I wanted to do with myself, and I just sort of, I could do admin office stuff. I could type, and so I ended up doing a bunch of corporate crap that I really, really hated. I was working in the garment center, kind of handling shipping for this garment manufacturer, kind of dealing with sweatshops, basically. Not my proudest moment, but I was there for a few years and just really just felt like I was in a holding pattern. And I made games for fun, and but it never occurred to me to like try to make a go of it. But a friend of mine had done an English teaching thing in Korea for about a year. And he said it was this amazing experience. You don't really need, any formal training. You just apply, and if they take you, they'll fly you over there, and you do that. And I just thought, like, wow, that sounds like a good way to shake things up, just to to make a clean break from everything that I'm doing in my life right now, because I couldn't see a way out of where I was, and I was like, excuse me, in my late 20s at that point, and you feel like the clock is ticking, like I gotta figure myself out, right? And I did that for a year, and I came back, and when I finished up in Korea, since I had worked for a Chinese company, I knew a bunch of people in China. So I spent about a month and a half just bumming around China, seeing all my friends, all my old colleagues. And I was on these long train rides, and I just had this notebook, and I would just like write down design ideas, just like for fun. Never, and while thinking, what am I going to do with my life? And meanwhile, I'm like designing all these games, and never really considered maybe I should try this. And so when I did get home and I did make the shiva in that cafe, I decided that I can't imagine doing anything else but this. I really just love it. Um, is there a way to make this work? As back then, the indie game scene was like nothing.
Yeah.
There was nothing. This was 2006, and it seems quaint now, but even just putting your credit card online was like scary. And so even that, like just getting that far was who the hell knows who has my credit card now. But back then exactly, yeah. But back then it was just people would mail me like cash in foreign currency. It was really insane.
Oh my God.
I would like travel across town to a bank and like, you know, get only a fraction of it back in American money. It was ridiculous what I did.
Wow.
But yeah, it was just a lot of just pure stubbornness because I needed like it was like I couldn't envision doing anything else.
Yeah.
Like I was determined to make this my livelihood somehow. And fortunately, I was single guy, didn't have a lot of expenses, had a little apartment that didn't cost very much. Even when I, was able to move back in, like my monthly expenses weren't terribly high, even for 2006. Living very simply, just getting games out, and really kind of having the time of my life. Maybe I'm looking back with rose tinted glasses now, but there was this real feeling of like, getting up and like, taking my laptop to a cafe and sitting down and thinking like, this is cool what I'm doing. Even if I wasn't earning any money, just the fact that like I felt like a cool, you know, creative like hipster type, or not even hipster type, but like it felt like a real bohemian kind of
Yeah.
lifestyle.
Yeah.
And it was really cool to live like that for a while, even though there was only so long I could maintain, sleeping at weird hours and being in cafes all day, even as a single guy.
Yeah.
But then when I got married and had a kid, that lifestyle was kind of impossible. So
Yeah. Do you still feel like you have the same passion you had back then, or has it shifted because of just how your life has shifted and how your catalog of games now is incredible. You have a legacy. And so I'm curious if like that bohemian
Aw.
feel is still like with you, or if you kind of miss that a little bit.
Well, I guess like what I do miss, and again, rose tinted glasses, very easy to romanticize the past and get
Sure.
nostalgic. Um, I think like maybe not the first game, maybe not like when I was working on Blackwell Legacy, because like I remember like barely sleeping and just kind of stumbling. I remember like towards like the last week, the week before launch, I remember kind of stumbling out for pizza at 2 a.m. because I hadn't eaten all day and thinking, okay, I know I didn't sleep tonight. I know I'm not sleeping tonight. I don't think I slept last night. Did I sleep the night before? And like not a way to live.
Oh
Like not a way to
no.
live.
That's so
And
bad.
I don't miss that. But I think for the next game, when I was starting, like I had one game out, I had a little bit of reputation. So like people knew who I was. and I was making this other game. I was kind of doing it very, very quickly because I was running out of money and I wanted to get a game out really quickly. This was Blackwell Unbound. And you can tell when you play it, I don't know if you have, that it's very, it was made on the cheap. Like ridiculously cheap.
Mm-hmm.
The artist who worked on it really did me a huge solid by
Yeah.
working so cheaply. She was a college kid off for the summer, and it was kind of an internship for her. Um, I'm forever grateful. But when I made that game, I was it was kind of this like I didn't have all of like the rules and experience I have now, but I was a bit comfortable because like people knew who I was. So I was making something for the pure just absolute it was just the pure creative rush of making something. And I wasn't concerned with like ultra polish. I just like I need to get this out in like 3 months. And I just like it was just this creative just burst. And that was great. Like
Yeah.
that was like knowing that I'm making something people are going to see it, because I had some fans already, and if that felt really good, and again, like I wasn't earning much money back then,
Yeah.
but so it's easy to romanticize it. I don't miss being poor, but like that just pure, just like running on that pure creative force was just an amazing experience. I
I
don't quite get that anymore. I get it in
yeah.
small bursts, but not for sustained long periods.
Yeah. It's when I talk with a lot of indie developers, and I mostly talk with people in the indie horror space, so I know, fundamentally it's a little bit
Have you ever
different.
talked to the Hobbs Barrow guys?
No, I would love to if you could hook
You
me
should
up.
talk to the Hobbs Barrow guys.
I would absolutely love to. We should talk about that in a minute. But
Sure.
when I talk to these devs, there is almost always a period of burnout that they experience at some
Mm.
point. And what you just described, normally people, not eating, not sleeping, really getting something out in a very short period of time. Most people look back on that and say, I never want to do that again. And that was horrible for me. And like, I
Mhm.
almost stopped making games entirely. It does not sound that way for you, but have you
Well, I think it
experienced
helped.
that?
I think what I did unintentionally smart. I have never been intentionally smart, but when I'm not even joking, like because I look back and I think, wow, that was smart what I did. I didn't intend for it to be smart as I was
Yeah.
doing it. Most of my early games had very very short time frames.
Mhm.
The Shiva took about 2 months.
Wow.
Originally that started off as a jam game, and then I improved the art a bit, added the voice acting, and then sold it. But then Blackwell Legacy was 4 months, and because I had no money to work with, very little experience, and I could bring people on board to work on it, but I couldn't pay them much, and the only way I could like maintain any level of enthusiasm was that it would have to be done pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Um, and so, fortunately, we did get it done quickly. Very, very small games, and so I was able to bounce back. They didn't earn a lot of money, but also I didn't invest a lot of money, and that was, like I said, unintentionally smart because I was able to learn from them quickly and iterate and like get onto the next project, and have like a nice catalog of stuff pretty quickly. The first like 5 years of Wadjet and I were really prolific. I think we did like yeah, we did a lot during that time, and so there were definite periods of burnout. But I think after that first game where I wasn't sleeping, and that was only like a week, where I lived like that. I knew I didn't want to live like that again.
Yeah.
I knew I didn't want. And for the follow up game, I think for Blackwell Unbound, I was a lot smarter. Like that game is even smaller. I made sure to go to bed at a reasonable time. Like it was it was like a lot of like that creative rush without like that insane stress at the
Yeah.
same time. Like I remember when I was nearing close to launch thinking like, wow, I'm not staying up like all night rushing to finish. Like the game's done. This is interesting. And
Yeah.
I think that kind of taught me, yeah, this is the right way to live. Believe me, there have been moments of burnout, but I kind of have learned how to deal with it.
Yeah. Who do you even turn to? Back then, like you said, the indie scene was much smaller. So when you are forming these ideas and you're like, I'm gonna make games and I'm gonna sell them, et cetera, et cetera. But like you said, I'm not even putting my credit card out there, right? The internet is still like a weird lawless place. Like who do you
Hmm.
even turn to be like, how do I make a game?
Oh, that's fascinating. You know what? Like I think like the one thing I wish I had back then was some kind of mentor figure. I didn't have a lot. There were some people like other indies who really helped me out in the early days and kind of introduced me to some people. Like there's someone I really credit with kind of helping me get like my foot in the door at some distribution channels. I don't know if you're familiar with Amanda Fitch of Aviond. She did Aviond,
No.
and she was the first, probably the first indie to do RPG Maker games. Like no one else had really done it before her, and she did this series of games called Avion, and they were very popular at the time. And like, she basically created a little ecosystem where a lot of people sold their games through her. And she managed to get in. She managed to get her games onto like these uh, casual portals like Big Fish and stuff like that. And she introduced me to a lot of them. Like I would often talk to her. I'm like, how did you do this? I would talk to her. And she said it was the casual audience that kind of got her to where she was. And she introduced me to a lot of those people and like managed to get my games on there. And for a short period of time, like my games did really well on those casual platforms to the point where I thought that that would be my audience,
Yeah.
that I would market my stuff to like that casual audience. This was like the late aughts, the late zeros. And so those games were really big at the time. But that very quickly shifted to like other stuff. They no longer were into the cute like pixel games anymore. They were all about like the gritty hidden object games. And so, and that whole market shifted, and so I had to pivot very quickly. But that like if it someone like that, just people who could help me, other people who could like who had just sort of blazed a path before I got there, and like I try to do the same for others when and where I can. But the market's so different now that
Yeah.
it's a lot harder to for me to even give any good advice because everything is so different from where how it used to be.
Yeah. Is that what drew you to the publishing side? Because not only have you developed your own games, you now publish with other developers. So how'd you get
Yeah.
into that?
Again, unintentionally smart. Was I had been published by a company called Play First. We did a game called Emerald City Confidential,
Hmm?
and um, I was, and again, this was during that period where I thought, oh, the casual audience. This is where it's at. I have cracked the code. This is how I'm going to sell the games from now on, and I'm going to be, on Easy Street. That's all I got to do. Um, and I was the artist who worked with me on Blackwell Unbound. She made a little game called Nanobots, this cute little game about these robots, and I thought like, wow, like this seems to be like this seems to fit with that casual market. And I thought like, hey, would you be interested in making this into a much like bigger game, and I would like publish it for you? Because I was thinking like, because these games took a while. This seems quaint now, but the games took it around a year to make. Now they
Hmm.
take longer than that. But at the
Sure.
time, each game would take a year, and then by that year, the previous sales of the previous games would kind of die down quite a bit. And if that new game didn't do well, then that was it. Like I was there was no coming back. And I wanted to kind of supplement, and I thought, hey, if I gave someone a little bit of money to make a game and I published it and took a cut, that would be a good way of spreading out the risk. This is all very idealistic. This is all
Sure.
very, and I thought like, well, I'm being published by a publisher. I'll just do what they do with me, which is not the way to learn to be a publisher. Like, that's not like, it's not like they were terrible and mean to me and I was mean
Sure.
and terrible to her, but it's just like, I thought like that just by copying someone. But anyway, like we did a game called Puzzle Bots, and I learned a lot from the process. Sadly, like I said before, the whole casual market had shifted, and so the game didn't do quite as well in that space as I had thought or hoped it would.
Hmm.
But it did cement me as a publisher, and then other developers started approaching me, and that's when Josh Nernberger approached me with Gemini Rue. I don't know if you're familiar with that one,
Heard of
but
it.
that was the game that like put us on the map. I guarantee a lot of people listening to this probably heard about us through Gemini Rue because that was the first game to like really break through the whatchamacallit, the like the point and click insular echo chamber,
Hmm.
and it got noticed by larger websites like Giant Bomb, Kotaku, and Rock Paper Shotgun, and all these websites that were just huge, especially at that time when those sites were like kingmakers.
Yeah.
And so they started writing about us, and our website could barely barely hold on. It was actually kind of cool, and so suddenly I wouldn't say it was like this mega hit and we earned millions of dollars, but it did cement us as like a legitimate business.
Yeah.
And this seemed like a good business model for me because I could kind of work on my own stuff. And then when I got finished with that and I was burnt out, I could then pivot to working with someone else on their project where I could be like a producer and advise and kind of help it, act as a midwife, as it were, help get it out there. And and then after a few couple of years of that, I get all, prima donna and think, well, enough helping people with their vision. What about my own? And then I go back to working on my own stuff again. And it's been kind of nice going back and forth.
Yeah.
I think that helps with the burnout as well, because like, there's nothing worse when I finish a project after years and I'm burnt out and I'm tired. The prospect of like starting over just feels incredibly daunting.
Yeah.
And so, but then I could just help someone else with their project, and that's kind of nice. And I like all that, and what I thought originally was like me doing them the favor
Hmm.
has actually been tremendously beneficial to me. I mean, not just because, it brings in a little bit more money, and also between my own releases, we have other games coming out with the Wadjet name attached. That's all great. But also I've worked with the most like amazing developers, writers, artists, composers, voice actors. Like I've just learned and worked with so many people that have just some of them have become really dear friends. And I love being in that position where it's like I have this like, there's these games that they would have been fine if they had gone with another publisher.
Sure.
They would have been fine. They're great games, but I'm glad it was me.
Yeah.
And I am very proud that it's like, they're part of our, catalog. I'm happy to have them there.
Yeah.
And it makes me feel good. Like I have these, you can't see them, but I have like the posters of the games on the wall. I have this poster up here. A couple of years ago, I commissioned this picture of like all the characters from all our games like together at a picnic.
Oh, I love
And
that.
like, yeah, you saw it. Yeah, it's so great. And I just love looking. It's right up here. The camera's like pretty solid, so I can't show you.
Yeah.
But it just makes me feel good seeing all that. It's like wow. It's like look how it's like a barometer of how far I've come.
Yeah.
It's like a little victory lap. And in 2 years, I plan on doing another one because it'll be 15 years.
My
So I mean,
gosh.
no, it'll be 20 years. Jesus Christ, it'll
Yeah.
be 20 years.
20 years. And so you've been doing this for so long. I have kind of a fun little thought experiment for
Oh
you.
no. Okay.
Having done all of this, having all these characters, all these games under your belt, people have discovered you at different points, right? My
Hmm.
first game I ever played from you was Unavowed. It's one of my very favorite games.
Oh.
It was transformative for me. Like there was
Oh
something,
wow.
I think it
Thank you.
changed my brain chemistry. Something about that game was so wonderful. If you could control the first game that people play from you that gives sort of like a
Ooh.
yeah, like a good vibe of who you are and what you
Hmm.
make, what game would you tell people to play?
Um. I think Unavowed would probably be up there because that was really like the game. I like different games for different reasons. Hello, we have a friend. I don't know if you can see. Can you see my
I
cat?
can't see. Oh,
There
I
we go.
can see
There
the
you go.
tail. Yes, we
Oh, hey,
love
buddy.
friends here.
Little celebrity.
Oh my god.
First things first, show me the baby. Oh my god.
We get
All right.
lots of cat friends while we're doing these. It's my favorite thing.
All right, he's sitting on my phone. That's okay. Go ahead. We love our cat. Uh, I think well, Unavowed is like it was the game that I was not sure I could pull off, and it really
Really?
pull it because it was ambitious. The kind of because of the kind of scope it had,
Yeah.
and the branching and stuff like that. I wasn't sure if we could pull it off, and I was amazed that we did. And it still feels just like very, very good to play.
Hmm.
I still really enjoy playing it. I think that is a good starting point. I do think I would also say Blackwell Epiphany, but you can't say start with the last game in the series.
Yeah.
'Cause I do think that the issue with Blackwell is that the first game is extremely ropey. It's extremely janky. It was my very first commercial game, or at least the game that I intended to sell commercially. And it shows. It shows every inch of that inexperience. And I think by the last one, it was exactly the kind of game that I had in my head when I started, and I was finally able to pull it off. Um, so I guess if I could control where people started from, I guess start with Unavowed and then work your way back is what I would say. And I guess
Yeah.
that's what you did.
I did. Yeah, actually I did start working my way through the Blackwell series. I think I own all of them. I can't I'm pretty sure after I played Unavowed, I was like, I must play everything from this developer. So like that's where
That's
that's where I
awesome.
ended
All
up.
right. Well, that's the thing. It's like every game kind of helps. Like the back catalog pushes the next game,
Yeah.
and then the next game hopefully will bring in new people who will then go to the back catalog.
Yeah.
And so that's always the hope. It's this like symbiotic thing, getting a long tail that I will continue to just earn a bit of a passive income.
Yeah.
So at this point, we have a pretty firm foundation. I mean, we need to get something else out because we're at the
Sure.
end of that long tail, but it's nice to be in that position.
Yeah, and speaking of the community of voice actors, etc., you've built along the way. The reason I played Unavowed, I'm pretty sure Edwin Tyong bought it for me, who voice acted in Unavowed. Yeah,
Yep,
so I'm a
yep,
friend
yep,
of
yep, yep,
Edwin's,
yep.
and he bought it for me, and then I fell in love, and it's so
Oh,
you've got
that's
your
so
voice
cool.
actors out there just
God
like
bless that
peddling it
man.
for you.
No, I adore him. He's the co-star in Old Skies.
Oh my
So,
gosh,
oh, and
amazing!
I happen to be wearing the shirt right now. I didn't realize
Yeah,
that.
let's
So,
talk about Old Skies. So, for anyone
okay, jumping
listening,
ahead.
yeah,
Let's
I
go
would
for it.
love to. For anyone listening that doesn't know, I'm going to give the brief little Steam description. So, a time travel adventure spanning 200 years. Dive into the past with time agent Fia Quinn as she embarks on 7 trips through time. History is up for grabs from the speakeasies of Prohibition to the vicious gangs of the Gilded Age to the World Trade Center on September 10th, 2001. So, ambitious sounding game.
I guess yeah. There's a reason why it's taken so long.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me about the
Yeah.
process of mapping out something of this scope.
Okay. Well, it had a couple of false starts. Mainly is that I had this idea for just this epic story of like, you know, time has broken and Fia has to like figure out what went wrong by going to these various eras and like trying to fix things, you know. But it was just too big and too epic, and that kind of broke my brain, especially since I was trying to make this like not this like this series of interconnected puzzles, kind of Day of the Tentacle style, but like through
Yes.
6 or 7 different eras of New York history. um and it was way too much. Like there was this professor who was like in jail in one era, and you have to, for a murder he didn't commit, so you have to go back in time, solve the murder, find the person who did commit the murder, and now he's like an established professor, and then you can talk to him about something, that kind of thing. But it
Whoa.
was all just, it was all way too much. There was just too much stuff, and it was breaking my brain. And because that's not a game, I'm not a very good like pre-planner. Most of my games have always been kind of designed as I went along, because they're very like mission and hub based. Like in Unavowed, it's all these individual
Hmm.
stories that are connected. And with what I was trying to do was make this whole big thing connected. It was not possible. So I split it up. I decided to do episodic stories where you have a series of missions going to one era, and you stay in that era until it's done. And there could be like, you know, timey-wimey hijinks while you're there, but for the most part, I tried to start off with a simple premise and expand on it from there. And so I did a lot more pre-planning and design than I was used to, because this time travel requires a bit of plotting. Um, but so I got a bit out of my comfort zone there, but I kept it manageable. But time travel's hard.
Yeah.
I learned that fast, and I discovered like all the pitfalls of. I talked to other people who've written time travel stories. And like, yep, we did the same thing. We know. Um, like you have to. The one thing I realized, like I looked at, if you look at other time travel stories, if you take the most famous time travel movie, Back to the Future, you could tell there must have been a mandate somewhere where they said that you can never leave Hill Valley and the stakes never go beyond Marty and Doc and their family.
Yep. It
It's
had
like,
to.
and when you think about it, these movies are epic, right?
Yeah.
But the stakes are quite personal and small. They never get into like world shadowing events. It's always
Right.
about them and their family and their circumstance. Like, and it never goes beyond that. And just by those like that mandate, I assume it was a mandate, they managed to work within that framework and created something amazing. And so I knew I had to do something similar, so I created rules for myself. I like you never leave New York. Like it all takes place in New York, and I managed to. It took a while, but I got there, and I'm very happy with what I created. And what's always amazing for me, and it's kind of why I'm driven to create these things to start with, is excuse me, how you always end up discovering why you've written something or why you've created something, and sometimes you don't realize that until you're almost done.
Yeah.
And with Blackwell, maybe I was about halfway through the series and I realized this is all about urban isolation, isn't it? And and just knowing what that theme was, I was able to kind of like I think that's why the last two games of this series are so much stronger. Because I realized what the theme was. And Old Sky is sort of the same thing. There's this a sense of like um all the stories are about legacy,
Yeah.
and what is like do you need one? What is the value of one? Would you go and change it if you could?
Mhm.
Can you live a worthwhile life without one? That kind of stuff. And I guess that's a very, I'm like in my, unspecified point in my 40s, let's say. And you think about that stuff as you get older
Yeah.
and you wonder like, what will the world remember me? What good have I done? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the game has sort of let me explore that with the using time travel as a way to explore that. And that's been interesting.
Do you, I mean, I've already used the word legacy to describe
You
everything
did.
you've
Appreciated
created.
that.
So, like, I mean, do you really get a chance to kind of look at it big picture and look at all the stuff you've created and how many people's lives that you've been in because of this? Like, do you
Hmm.
feel like you have a legacy?
It's interesting because yes and no, because you always, no matter what point you reach, you look at what other people have achieved, right?
Mhm.
And you think you're like I see even other indies, and what they've achieved is just so immense compared to what I've done. And you always wonder. Sometimes you just wonder, like, have I made an impact? Does anyone care? Like, am I just screaming into the void here? Like, you never know. And it's especially now with like it's funny because people just come like just write me every day and tell me. But yet, if some reason it's like you have to remember that yeah, these are lives, and it makes a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is amazing. It's the most gratifying thing to hear when someone says, "Yeah, like this helped me process, this trauma in my life or what have you." And it's amazing. I don't know quite know how to respond
Yeah.
because I just all I could say is thank you, and I'm really gratified to hear. It's gratifying to hear that. And sometimes, yeah, you do have to take stock. And I have a list. I have a folder of, like an ego folder of just all the anytime anyone sends me something like that, I put it there. And whenever I feel stressed out and just wondering like, what's the point of any of this?
Yeah.
No one freaking cares. I have to go back and look at that and try to remember, um, because yeah, it's nice, to to know that people are responsive to what I do, and because that's why you create something. That's why you're driven to do. That's why I'm driven to do this,
Yeah.
is because I'm hoping to reach people. Like I have something I want to say, and I think it's useful. I'm at a point in my life where it's like I've had these experiences. Here's how I feel about them. Maybe they'll help you, and then they'll take that and pay it forward. And it's a very beautiful thing. But at the same time, it's like I do want to like earn a living and support my family and pay my
Sure.
bills and stuff. So it's like that's what I'm constantly worried about. Like mostly because if I can't do those things, I will have to stop.
Yeah.
And that is, I love doing this so much that is always like my biggest worry is that I will have to stop doing this if the games don't sell
Yeah.
or if we can't pay our bills, then I will have to stop. and I don't want to.
I don't
So
foresee that happening at this
knock
point. I
on
mean,
wood, knock
you've
on wood.
yeah, I don't want to jinx anything for sure. I feel like you're what is it? The Miyazaki of point and click games where you're just gonna keep making things until you're like way too old to be doing this, and then you're gonna
I'll come out of
continue.
retirement
Yeah,
like 3 times, and then yeah, then if I'll yeah, just hopefully if my daughter wants to take over, I won't treat her the same way.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, if she says she doesn't have an interest in doing this, but we'll see.
Does she play your games?
She likes watching me play them.
Okay, all
But
right.
she is a gamer. She's obsessed with Zelda.
Oh,
She just will do everything possible in the game and then just keep running around and like never do the ending because she doesn't want it to end.
yeah,
So, which I find very sweet. But yeah, she does like playing games. But she hasn't really played mine much because most of them are on the computer.
yeah.
But she likes watching me play them. She actually really liked watching me play Hobbs Barrow, which I
Really
find very funny. Yeah, she
interesting.
she actually came home one day from school. She was like 9 at the time, but she came home with this essay where she wrote like, "I like watching my daddy test his games like Hobbs Barrow. Hobbs Barrow is about, and she gave a little synopsis. She come to the town to look for Hobbs Barrow. It did not go well. The
You think?
end." It's just like no spoilers, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
very much an understatement, and I just thought it was the sweetest thing.
That's adorable.
Yeah, and I actually asked the voice actress to read that out loud for Eve, and she flipped. It was so cool.
Oh, that's so
I sent that to
sweet.
Sam, and I'm like, this is a crazy idea, but could you read this for me in Thomasina's voice? And she did.
Oh, that's so sweet. I
Yeah,
love that. I feel like as she gets older, it may be easier to appreciate narrative-driven games, right? That are not quite so action-based and stuff. I think
yeah.
that's hard for someone at like 9, 10, 11 years old. So that makes sense.
She remembers details. Like we played the last time I played the Blackwell series with her, she must have been 7 or 8, and she still remembers them because she looks at the pictures. She's like, "Why is Madeline sitting on the ground?" Like she remembers the characters, and
Oh,
I find that very cool. So
that's
yeah, that's a
amazing.
legacy too. That's a legacy too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely. Um, do you get time to play games ever?
Yeah, I try to,
You
but I
do?
usually can't. Like I don't play indie stuff. Like I'm playing Dragon Age right
No.
now, and it's
Really?
like I'm loving it. I'm playing Veilguard because it's like I can't. It's hard for me to sit down and play games that like, especially adventure games, because I will just sit and think either I will never make something as good as this,
Ooh.
or I'm like my games are so much better than this. Like it's hard
Yeah.
for me to like have some distance from another point and click adventure game
Yeah.
and view it very objectively as a pure consumer. There's some exceptions. Like I played Perfect Tides about a year or two ago, and that one is such a transcendent work of art. Like it's gorgeous. The animation's amazing, and it also takes place near where I grew up, which is cool.
Oh, wow.
Takes place on Long Island, which is funny.
That's
And
so
it turns out
cool.
we're neighbors now. She doesn't live the developer doesn't live very far from me, so we hang out.
Really? A small
Yeah,
world.
yeah, I know. It's just very funny. It's hard for me not to fanboy all over her. But yeah, I don't play many of those, but I do make time to play games. I do try.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I was curious if you, between making games, ever had chances to like actually sit down and
At night,
relax.
I can't work at night anymore
That's
because it
probably a
used to
good thing.
be. It's like I'll work late at night, and then after our daughter goes to bed, it's like no, I don't think I will.
No.
I'm
Till
just
days
tired.
are long enough. Yeah.
Yeah, like once like after dinner, I was like, I'm not going back to work.
Yeah.
With the rare exceptions, but I just don't have the energy anymore, and
Yeah.
or proper work-life balance, one of the two.
Yeah. Which are both important for not getting burnt out.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Yeah. It still happens. It still
Sure,
happens.
sure.
But
Happens to
yeah.
all of us. Back to old skies. You mentioned you are a New Yorker, grew up on Long Island.
Oh, I never actually told you what it was about.
I was gonna say if you would like to go ahead and
I gave you all these like
describe.
esoteric this esoteric treatise on the themes of the game, but I didn't actually tell you what the game was about.
Go for
Shows
it.
where shows where my priorities are. Jesus Christ, man.
Oh, it's good. It's good.
Okay, so basically what it's about, you play Fia Quinn, who's an agent for this agency called Chronozen, and what the Courtesan does is sell packages, travel packages to the past, and it costs a lot of money. And your job is to go back in time with these clients who want to like see something or do something or change something, you know. And your job is to make sure nothing ever goes wrong. And so naturally, nothing ever does, which is the lie. Everything goes wrong,
That's
and
it.
things go off the rails every single instance, and you have to put them right somehow.
That's really cool. You mentioned specifically uh, the World Trade Center on September 10th.
Yes. Yeah.
And growing up, in New York, being in New York, I assume you were in New York September
Hmm.
11th. I think a lot of people try to avoid creating something with recent tragedies, right? It's and I say recent, and I was 5 when that happened, right? But like I still remember it. What, as a New Yorker, I guess, was your decision to kind of put that specific experience in a game?
Oh, I mean, I guess like I wanted. I guess I feel very strongly that like a lot of my games take place in New York because I'm a New Yorker, even though I don't live there now. Um, and I feel like they say write what you know, and I've always felt that because I have a big attachment to the city, and I have to care about what I write and what I create, and that because I care about the city or I care about a specific location that I put in the game, I'm able to kind of create the I can it's like a bridge between me and the thing I'm making. And because I have that connection, I'm able to then bridge the connection between the game and you. And so I have a lot of what I do in pre-production is find reasons to care about what I'm doing and what I'm making, and I think that's important. Because if I don't care, you're not gonna, and it creates a sincerity that can't be faked. And so there's a reason why a lot of the Blackwell locations are located maybe 5 blocks from where I used to live. Like you had Washington Square Park and the Minetta Tavern and Grace Church. And I don't think you went to Union Square, but you went to a store in Union Square. You go to the East Village a lot because that's where I used to live. And then in Unavowed, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Tompkins Square Park, Astor Place with the Cube. The areas of Brooklyn that you go to is like my neighborhood. And so I feel like I'm able to care. Like it's something that like because I have that experience, I know what it's like to create that experience. I can create that experience. And since I lived through 9/11, not just 9/11 but the aftermath of 9/11, like I very deliberately avoided the day itself. The mission takes place on September 10th, so it's the day before, and then 2 months later, so it's like the aftermath.
Oh,
And um, and being someone who lived through it, like I know what that was like,
yeah.
and I know what was in my head, and I was able to kind of filter that through a lot of the characters, and a lot of like their thoughts mirrored my own. It's a very I can't say it's a unique experience to me because every New Yorker went through something, but as someone who makes these games, it's a type of story that I'm in a unique position to tell.
Yeah.
And so I decided that like excuse me, because I have such a close connection with that, it's something I could do. It's something that it's something I felt driven to do. And it's not necessarily a story about 9/11.
Sure.
It's the a backdrop. Like what the story is about is that there's this cop who is like haunted by the one murder she could never solve because it happened, the night of September 10th, and then no one could ever. Obviously, it wasn't investigated because the police were distracted by something else, and so you go and investigate it and try to, and it leads to other things, obviously, but it's knowing that that's hanging over everything kind of adds this like element of dread, to the whole story. And it's I don't like saying I want to do this because no one else has done it before, but I felt drawn to do it because it's something that it's a story that I'm able to tell,
Yeah.
and no one else really can. I mean, obviously other New Yorkers can, but like not many other game developers can. Like
Yeah.
I can tell the story. I can. It's something I can do,
Right.
and I remember what it was like so clearly, because I lived through it, and it was nice to be able to kind of purge those demons.
Yeah.
and I was always joking whenever there was like something bad going on in the world. I'm like, well, I guess I'll distract myself by working on the story about 9/11. Here we go.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it- so it was kind of it was kind of very cathartic
Yeah.
to revisiting that was hard, but it was also kind of cathartic to like finally do something with those feelings. So yeah, that's another reason why we create is to do something with feelings we have that
Yeah.
would just fester otherwise.
It's fascinating that that came 20 years later and not directly in games you made like that year, even because you were making games in
Uh,
2001.
yeah, it was. None that took place in New York though. I think Blackwell Unbound. There's like a there's a location where you can see the World Trade Center,
Hmm.
and it had just been built in the year that game takes place, and so I put it in there, and it felt that was 2007, and I felt like it was the most controversial thing to
Yeah.
just put the World Trade Center in a background, even though it was like geographically correct
Right.
in back then. It still felt crazy to do that. Like, oh, this is like it felt so transgressive, and um, yeah, it would have to do it to tell a story like that back then. It was still too raw. Like I didn't even realize until years later just like how deeply that day affected me because I thank God I didn't see them fall, but I did see them on fire. We were driving to my grandmother's funeral of all things.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
yeah, not a good day. But I remember, but the same thing as seeing it on TV, like knowing I could have been there. It still just would hit me hard. I remember being at like a nightclub several years later, and there was a smoke machine, right? And like the dry ice like went flying towards me, and I had this insane sense memory of the smoke billowing from the towers, right? And like I am like freaked out, and it was very strange. And
Ooh.
I'm thinking, okay, maybe I'm not over this.
Yeah.
I'm not over this at all. And it's like any traumatic event. You it sort of lies there in the back of your head and comes out in weird ways. And it was nice to do something with it.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I did. I do wish that it wasn't the second to last mission in the game, but maybe that's good because then people will make a point of playing through the whole thing.
Oh yeah,
But
absolutely.
it's one of my favorite. I think it's one of the better stories in the whole game, and it's one of the later ones, which is probably good. So I don't peek early. We'll see what people say.
So I don't peek early. I don't imagine that's going to be an issue. For people who are familiar with your games and are
Oh, thank
excited to
you.
see Old Skies
Bless your
come
heart.
out,
Thank you. Thank you.
are they what else can we expect? What can we expect that's a little bit new because your style has shifted over the
Okay.
years.
Well, I've indulged in a bit more like comedy, I guess.
Ooh.
The tone is all over the place, and because like the first, I don't know if you played the demo, but it's quite serious. The second mission is quite serious. The third one's ridiculous. The fourth one is nuts. The fifth one is the 9/11 mission, and the sixth one is also quite somber. But so the tone is a little schizophrenic, but because it's chapter based, I figure slight changes in tone are okay. I started the game during the height of lockdown.
Mm.
And so there's this element of like, you know, this desire to, want to go to the past. And so I was having a lot of trouble kind of finding the voice, and I was blocked hard, mainly because everything was so distracting in the world. But then I kind of decided to just if I had an idea and it made me smile or it made me laugh or made me feel good in any way, I would start chasing it. I would pursue it and see where it went. And I'm like, is this a little tonally inconsistent? Yeah, I don't care. I'm going for it because I didn't want perfect to be the enemy of done. And
Yeah.
I just went with it, and I think it works really well because um it does have this balance of humor and sincerity that I really admire in other works. I don't know if you're familiar with this time travel show called Legends of Tomorrow.
Unfamiliar.
I love it. It's really good. First season's terrible and clunky, but the rest of it's amazing. It does the same thing. It's bonkers, but at the same time, so sincere. And manages that. It walks that tightrope like a knife's edge. And I'm not quite at that level, but that's what I was going for
Yeah.
because I wanted to make myself happy first and foremost. Because if I'm not happy, like I'm not going to enjoy the process and the whole thing will be miserable. And again, and the player will sense that. And
Yeah.
so I had to keep myself happy, and that was the most important thing. And so I think a lot of my process on this game was, excuse me, learning to love it, finding reasons why I love this, and keep going. And that's what I ended up doing.
It's very refreshing to hear someone, just as like a fellow creative that is so hell-bent on saying, I want to make what I want to make and I want it to make me happy. Because I find that a lot of people, once they hit success, maybe not all people, but once they hit success, they feel like they are pigeonholed into something so specific to continue with that success. And to hear you talk about it of like, I don't care if it sounds like tonally inconsistent. Like, I want to enjoy this is like
This game
very
broke
refreshing.
every single rule I ever made for myself.
Yeah, no, it's
Oh, yeah.
it's very refreshing and very
Oh, thank you.
inspiring, I think, for other people who are creating and don't want to get pigeonholed into stuff.
I mean,
you know?
I've kind of been pigeonholed into doing this type of game,
Sure.
and that's fine. There's no reason why I couldn't do anything else. I just choose not to.
Yeah.
Because this is what I'm familiar with. I feel like I'm good at this, and it's a language, like the language and tropes of adventure games I'm familiar with. And so I stick with it because it's what I know, and it's how I know how to tell a story.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, that's what adventure games are, or any kind of game really. It's a way to tell a story at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But you asked a specific question, which I totally didn't answer. You said, like, in what way is this game different? Like, when I say indulge in comedy, one thing that makes it funny is that the player character can die. And it's kind of considered like a sin to kill the player in adventure games. But what I do is, because she's a time traveler, when she dies, she gets rewound like about 5 or 10 minutes or so, and can try again, kind of Prince of Persia style. And she keeps all of the memories from the previous loops, and so I can indulge in a little moon logic, because often the case with like the reason why puzzles are moon logic is because you do something and some weird thing happens and you think there's no way I would have, like, that makes no sense. But with time loops, it's like you know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's about experimentation and seeing what's going to happen, and then putting all the pieces together to achieve the desired result in the end, so you don't die. Like a character walks into a room and shoots you, but he steps on a particular spot on the floor, so you like put a ball there so he falls, that kind of stuff. And so I got to indulge in like this a little bit more like puzzly moon logic than I would have done otherwise.
Yeah.
And that was just fun. And there's something about giving yourself license to kill the player that makes you kill them at every opportunity.
That makes me really excited because one of my there's a clip, and I'm sure Edwin reposted it at some point, when I played Unavowed for the first time and Edwin's character eats your face. I burst out laughing. I was just not expecting, and then the game resets you immediately.
I'm gonna talk to him. Excuse me, sir.
I can smell
Hi.
Jim child are so fatigued you can barely stand.
And it was just such a funny, like,
That was
unexpected
just
moment.
Ben, like I tell Ben, like, yeah, the monster kills you, and I was expecting he would like slash your throat or something, or like strangle you or whatever, and then no, Ben just has them rip your face off.
So funny.
It's just like, okay,
Yeah.
and what's funny is that, like, because in the placeholder stage it was just message pops up saying monster kills you, and then it flashes, right? So that in the actual game, when you put in the animation, the monster kills you, and then it restarts. So I just kept it like that, and it was really just unintentionally funny that way, because yeah, that was, oh my god, yeah. But Unavowed, yeah, I don't shy away from death in games, but in Unavowed, it's just a restart. It's like
Yes.
it never happened. Just forget it ever happened. But in Old Skies, it's actually part of the story in the narrative, and
That's cool.
it gives the player character Fia a very lackadaisical attitude to dying, which never stops being funny.
That's very exciting. I am
Yeah.
very much looking forward to that. Before we finish up, I want one more fun question.
Sure. It's take as long as you need. I'm not going anywhere.
I love that. Old Skies is about time travel, as we've said. If you, Dave Gilbert, were a time traveler and you could go back and talk to 20 years ago Dave Gilbert, what would you say? What advice would you give?
Okay, I guess back then there was always a sense of like I gotta fake it till I make it, and I guess the one thing I would probably tell myself is you don't have to fake it. Like this is who you are, and who it's you know. I don't know if you're going to be like this forever, but you're going to be like this for a very, very long time. And so this is who you are. Just own that. You don't pretend otherwise. Um, but again, you're asking a person writing a time travel game what he would do if he goes back in time to talk to his previous self. So now I'm thinking of all the dangers that
Right,
could
right,
present.
right.
So, now I got to be careful. But that's what I would probably do. Because there's always that sense of like, who am I fooling back then? You're like, who am
Yeah.
I fooling? Like, this will barely last 5 weeks. I remember registering WadjetIGames.com and just pulling that name out of my butt because I always liked the symbol of the Wadjet Eye, and I always thought I would use that as my logo.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't think of a name for a studio. And I just thought, oh, I'm going to use the Wadjet Eye. I'll just call it Wadjet Eye, whatever. Like, this is going to last maybe 5 weeks anyway. Who cares? And then 20 some odd years later, like, it's still here.
Yeah.
And if I had known that, yeah, that's what I would do. I'd tell myself to choose a better name than Wadjet Eye.
What
Because
would you choose? Do you have one in mind?
honestly, I don't know. I
Okay.
have no idea.
All right.
Like, I have no idea what I would call myself because I still haven't come up with anything better. If people could stop spelling Wadjet with a G, that would be great.
Mm-hmm.
That would be great. That would be wonderful.
That's probably pretty tough. I will
Yeah.
say it's probably decent. Like Wadjet Eye Game's pretty easy to Google and come up with something unique. So you chose well that way. I will say
cool.
you share a first and last name with so many famous or like moderately famous people. There's
There's a-
like a
There's an
snooker player.
eco-terrorist from
There's
the
an
60s.
eco-terrorist.
It was like from the 60s to the 70s. His name is David Gilbert. He was from an organization called the Weathermen, and he was in jail like for maybe 50 years. He was just let out. He was pardoned last year by the governor of New York, and like it was really funny because like my mom forwarded me, it's like Cuomo pardons David Gilbert. I'm like, well, thanks, I guess.
There are so many people. There was like a snooker player and like several
Yep.
musicians, and like you were the first person with a Wikipedia page that came up. So that's
Oh, that's
exciting. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's
if you
because of my search
Google
history, but
if you Google my name, you're gonna get a lot of different hits. But if you know me at all, Dave Gilbert Games, like you'll find me.
yeah.
I'm very online. I'm very easy to find.
Yeah. Speaking of that, if people want to buy your games, if people want to find you in general, where's the easiest place to do that? Where can people find you?
Easiest place to do that would be WadgetEyeGames.com. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Mastodon. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. Just look for me. I'm out there. I'm not hard to find, really. I'm very, very online. Like I'm there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this. This was super
Thank you.
fun. And
Yeah.
best of luck with the release. I think it's going to be
Thank you so
amazing,
much.
and I can't wait to
And
play
I
it.
realized I never asked you what I see like Brisby. Like, what is your name?
Breezeby. Yeah, you can call me Bree.
Bree. Bree is your name.
Yeah.
Okay, Bree. All right, cool.
We really
Gotcha.
established things right at the get-go there.
Yeah. I'm great at this. I'm great
No,
at this.
you're great.
Basically, you contact me, say you want to chat, want to have an interview. I'll be like, okay.
I
Like,
love
I'll
that
just-
so much.
I won't even like I've just waited for one day where I end up being interviewed by some like alt-right Nazi
I was
website
gonna
and like,
say,
oh,
you gotta be
like,
careful with who you're
I
saying
should have
yes to.
I should have looked into you first. Hasn't happened yet, but I always take the meeting, as they say. So
That's
yeah.
amazing. Well, thank you again, and for everyone else watching at home, I will see you in the next video.